I think it was back in the alpha phase, where we wrote some. This is the using Drupal migrate to copy content, sorry, from the old Brighton and Hove and Croydon sites into the new LocalGov Drupal. So the very base first LocalGov Drupal sites were the Brighton and Hove and Croydon, and we have sort of abstracted their original code. So they needed to move on to LocalGov Drupal, or that was the plan. So we used Drupal migrate modules to do this basically. So this is kind of Stella's point, was the mapping part. So it's mapping fields and then doing the migration. So we have a module which uses the Drupal migrate to map fields between Drupal entities. So Drupal entity can be seen as a line in a database, really, a line in a spreadsheet. It's content, and an entity type is a kind of a database table. It is a thing like a node. So we have, if we find, for example, a landing page, where is service landing page? This will mean nothing to anyone who's not a techie, but we define a source. It's really simple. It's just plain text, and what we're defining is a source, which in this case is a Drupal 8 database, but it could be anything. So it could be any database. It could be sort of WordPress. It could be spreadsheets. You can use any sort of data source here in the Drupal migrate. And then we're processing it, and here we're just mapping fields. So we're mapping different fields from the source into what then becomes a destination, and the destination is here as a node. So we're mapping nodes. Mapping landing pages and the fields for it. And we've got lots of these files, each mapping a different type. So we've got sort of media type, we've got images, media, we've got users all being here, we've got different paragraph types. And then it's relatively straightforward to use some basic tools which come with Drupal to run the automation of this, and it will suck all the data out of your old database and stick it into the new database. That is a very rough idea of how this sort of thing works. Obviously, it's sort of a technical side of things. It's not, you need a developer to do this sort of stuff. I wrote this originally for Adnan and Andy to use, and I think Adnan and Andy have used it now, so perhaps they can talk a bit about how that went.
Okay, Andy, should I go first?
Yeah, if you want to go first, Adnan.
Okay, so yeah, Steve wrote the code for migrating Drupal 8 to LocalGov Drupal. LocalGov Drupal was, of course, Drupal 8. So this was the Drupal 8 to Drupal 8. And we used Steve's code. It worked great. We added some to it and modified it a little bit, and it worked great. And we had a working site. So we actually had two sites. One was a Drupal 8 site, one was a Drupal 7 site. So our Drupal 8 site was built using code from the Brighton Council. So Brighton's site and our site was very similar. So this module that Steve has written, it has two primary audiences, which is us in Croydon and the Brighton Council Drupal team. So for the Drupal 8 part, we used Steve's module and we had what we needed, the migration. And then we had Drupal 7 site. So that's something I had to write. And we use the same Drupal migrate module to do all of it, and it works fine. The biggest problem that we had when migrating from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 was the WYSIWYG content that you usually if you use Drupal, you will see the body field, and add file links for files or maybe YouTube videos and this sort of stuff. And the format that the WYSIWYG in Drupal 7 saves it is not what Drupal 8 does. So we had to write some custom plugins for this migrate. So it extends Drupal's migrate module, and then it made sure that the links for the files and the images, they work just as before, and then it all worked good. And I will hand it to Andy, but before that I will just mention one thing that everyone working on migration for Drupal should know. So you usually end up in two scenarios, that you have an old site and you have a new site, and one fine morning you run all the migration and you say that, okay, we are shutting down the old site, and from today we are going to use a new site. So that's the happy first scenario. And most often what happens is you say that, okay, some of the sites will be served from the new site and some of the pages will be served from the old site. So you end up with two sites and you keep updating both sites. So content, even after migration, they start to diverge. So you need to continually to run the migration process so that the new content from the old site is coming to the new site. And this is where we had some conflicts. So the way you avoid it is Drupal gives you node IDs, and when you run your migration for the first time, and then you tell your database that any new node that's going into your site, they should be given a node ID which is a lot higher than what you have now. So for example, say your highest node ID is 1000. And so you tell your database that from now, any new node should be given a node ID greater than 3000. So that gives you like an empty space, like 2000. From 1000 to 3000, you have got 2000 IDs left. These are something that will be used for the content coming from the old site. So you're bringing in content from the old site to the new site, and you can use those IDs. And if you follow this, then there wouldn't be any conflict. Otherwise, it leads to all sorts of headaches. So that's all from me. And any questions, please feel free to ask us in Slack. Andy, over to you.
Yeah, so I don't have much rehearsed to add. The things that so in terms of the tech of the module worked fairly straightforward. You know, it's just a command line in the end, drush, migrate, dash, all. We both, me and Croydon have, both Brighton and Croydon have like site-specific branches of the module, mostly because we've got lots of other custom code, you know, custom content types or custom fields that we've added that are very specific to our sites. And I think there's also, I updated the module to the latest dev version simply because you have to use, you know, simply because it's the latest one supports Drupal 9. I don't think the current one does. Yeah, that's kind of all this. I mean, I don't know in terms of use for other people. It's there as a mapping, which I think was the original purpose. It maps what the fields are. So if you were to build your own from a different site, you could fork that module and then just start replacing the field names with your own. And you can have a look at the branches that are labeled Brighton site specific and Croydon site specific, just to get a sense of how we've done it. But in terms of us, the process for us has been like fairly straightforward with that module. It sort of just brings everything in. So yeah, that's all I've got.
Yeah, I suppose it should be said that this really is a sort of demo module for developers to get going with it, because your data, the data you're migrating from, is going to kind of depend on your data model. So, you know, this is you will need to write your own mappings between different fields, and yes, it will be a developer job to sort of do that. But this is an example of how to run a Drupal migration, and I think it would give someone with with experience of this, how, you know, a good start into doing it.
The other thing to add is the guy who runs Drupal Camp North, they've done quite a few things on migration, and I think they've got some videos on like using migrate generally. I like doing custom process plugins and that. There's a few in that module, but sometimes you've got data when you need to do things to it just to get it across. So there's lots of resources out there in Drupal community for sort of writing the code you need to get it across.